to the most cursed Russian guns ever made. Part 1. Alright guys, the Mega Yapper with no access to firearms is back. I'm so sorry guys, I haven't been uploading a lot of long form videos, been a little busy. But today is not the day to be busy. Today we're going to record some long form. So today we're ranking some of the most cursed guns the Soviet, now Russians, have made in the last century, especially during the Cold War. I think since the early 20th century, firearms design has hit a plateau. If you think about it, we are essentially using the same firing mechanisms that were developed at the start of the last century, with just a few minor aesthetic and ergonomic changes. Believe it or not, the modern day HK416 is a direct descendant of the World War II era Soviet standard barrel rifle, the SVT-40. We're not in the same era when firearms were going from matchlock to flintlock to caplock and eventually to self-loading. We have pretty much stagnated. But if anyone was experimenting the most with newer, more radical small arms since the end of World War II, it was the Soviets. They did create some of the most wacky looking and genuinely cursed and sometimes even good guns in their efforts to make the perfect service rifle for their soldiers, which they probably already had, the AK and its variants. But that didn't stop them from pushing the boundaries even more, and that's what we're talking about today. Keep in mind the guns we're gonna discuss in this video have never been mass produced and only exist as prototypes in museums. So let's start the torture, guys. TKB 022 PM. What the hell is this? I mean, look at it, guys. What is this? It somewhat looks like a fried fish because of its orange bakelite body, which, by the way, is the same polymer from which original AK-74 mags were made. This thing was made by a truly out-of-the-box thinking Soviet firearms designer Yerman Alexandrovich Korobov. He worked for the now famous Tula arms plant, and believe it or not, he actually designed a bullpup rifle, the TKB-408, back in 1946 as a direct competitor to the AK-47. Of course, he was not going to win against Kalashnikov. His gun was too unconventional for that era. But losing to Kalashnikov didn't stop this guy. He just kept making wackier guns throughout his long career. And one thing common in all of his designs is the bakelite. Most of his later designs use this polymer for the body. The TKB 022 PM may look too cursed, but it was actually a really clever design. It had a weird annular gas piston system in which the gas port went around the barrel. Also, if you look at it closely, you'll realize, where did the bolt go? Isn't the gun a little too bullpup? I mean, the magazine literally attaches at the end of the stock. It had a teeny tiny bolt that was struck from the front and moved vertically, unlike most modern guns in which the bolt moves horizontally. Due to this vertical movement of the bolt, it does not require a lot of space, allowing the mag to be placed at the end of the stock. The spent casings were ejected from the front through an ejection tube. Korobov designed this Soviet black magic in the early 1960s as a replacement for the standard issue AKM. Yeah, he really thought that this super complicated bakelite fish with poor ergonomics could replace the AKM. Needless to say, the Soviet military officials took one look at it and rejected it. But it did not die completely. Can you guess which other gun looks like a fish and has a plastic body and ejects spent casings from the front? Yes, the FN F2000. FN definitely took inspiration from this weird design and made the F2000, which also was not very successful. So yeah, because of all this, all the crazy lore that this weapon has, I think we can safely say that the TKB 022 PM sits in the truly cursed category. Next gun. The Nikonov machine gun, also known as the NMG. Another case of what was the Soviet gun designer smoking? But this time the designer was not a complete failure. He is in fact Gennady Nikonov, the same guy who designed the legendary AN-94. Yup, that crazy gun with a moving barrel and a fire rate of around 1800 rounds per minute. The AN-94 ended up actually being adopted in limited numbers by the Russian army. This guy loved guns with a crazy high fire rate, so much so that he funded the Nikonov machine gun's development with his own pocket in the late 70s. It was not requested by any branch of the Soviet military. So what was the NMG? It was essentially a twin-barrel light machine gun capable of firing 3000 rounds per minute. Which other gun is capable of doing that? Yes, the M134D minigun. But the difference is that the minigun is belt-fed and is fired from a mount that makes it controllable. Mr. Nikonov probably didn't think about how fast the NMG would eat up a regular AK-74 30-round mag. Also, how would a soldier control that psychotic fire rate? From what I could understand, the gun had alternatively reciprocating barrels, meaning when one barrel fired, the other chambered around. The only surviving prototype of this cursed gun is now at the Klasnikov Museum in Ishevsk, Russia. I would truly want to visit this place one day. But how cursed is it? I'd say this thing is not that far-fetched compared to the previous weapon. It has two barrels, and we have had guns with two barrels, especially self-loading guns, machine guns, assault rifles even, like the Gilboa Snake. But what makes it different is that it supposedly has a crazy high fire rate. With all of that taken into consideration, I would say we can safely put the Nikonov machine gun in hella cursed category, guys. It is hella cursed. Not as cursed as the previous gun, the TKB, but hella cursed, definitely. Next gun. The 80.002. Alright, this thing we'll have to go through a little bit of backstory before we can get to this cursed thing. So in the late 90s and the early 2000s, a lot of NATO countries were experimenting with this weird idea of an all-in-one type of gun, sort of a Swiss Army knife of guns. It was called the Objective Individual Combat Weapon. Essentially an assault rifle, a grenade launcher, and a target acquisition computer in the form of an optic combined in a single platform. The computer system was usually made for special programmable grenades which would explode at a predetermined range and height. Needless to say, it never worked. It was too complicated, the electronics were delicate and could be damaged easily, and if you know, just having an under-barrel grenade launcher makes the gun significantly heavier. Now adding a whole ass computer on top of that would make the system just unwieldy, which it was. Still, there were a lot of these abominations around the world, the first one being the XM25, made in USA. But what if I tell you that the Soviets also tested the concept in a different way, a few decades before NATO? Of course they did, it was a potential all-in-one gun. They called it the 80.002. Weird name, sounds more like a radio frequency. It was essentially a regular AK-74 with a 12.7mm 50 caliber grenade launcher on the right side of the gun. There's not a lot of info available about it, but it did exist. Everything, the mags, the barrels, the bolt faces had to be two. One for the grenades, the other one for bullets. I can't really say how effective the 50 cal grenades were because that's a little too small for explosives. Later experiments by other countries such as the American XM29 used 20mm grenades, and regular grenade launchers usually use 40mm grenades. So we don't know how effective the 50 cal grenades were. It lacked any sort of electronics, understandable, it was the 70s. But eventually Soviets came to the same conclusion that the rest of the countries would come to a few decades later. A regular under-barrel grenade launcher is far more effective than all of this crap, like the Colt M203 or the Russian under-barrel grenade launcher. So how cursed is this thing, the 80.002? Since it looks like a normal AK-74 from the side, if you squint your eyes hard enough, you would see a regular AK-74. They concealed the grenade launcher part really nicely with this design. So I'd say it'll land in cursed. No, actually it'll land in somewhat cursed. I think that's fair. The TKB-059. Our guy Korobov is back. This time he created something that I think only Terminator would be able to wield. The TKB-059, if you look at it from the side, it looks like a badly designed bullpup with very sharp edges. Only when you look from the front, you realize how ridiculous this design is. It has got 3 barrels for God's sake. Also, this time it's chambered in 7.62, which means even more recoil. At least the NMG was chambered in 5.45 and it was an LMG with a bipod. This is a 3-barreled assault rifle chambered in 7.62. How do you fire this thing without injuring yourself, let alone hitting something? Again, the idea here was to have a psychotic fire rate, around 2,000 rounds per minute, to increase the hit probability of the soldier. I'd say it was pretty impractical and an over-engineered solution to a simple problem. Like if you want to increase the hit probability, just add a burst mode. I think a burst mode, although not perfect, works better than a lot of these crazier over-engineered designs. The N94 also tried to do this. We need to add this like crazy type of firing mode to increase the hit probability. Although they also went with the burst mechanism. But this time, Nikonov said, let's have 3 flipping barrels, shoot at the same time with the really high fire rate, around 1800 rounds to 2000 rounds per minute. You do get the hit probability, but at the same time, you don't get the hit probability, because how the hell do you control this thing? How do you even hold it? So yeah, it fed from a 60 round box magazine. What the hell, guys? How fast is this thing gonna chew up a 60 round magazine? So I think this thing easily lands in truly cursed. alongside its brother, the TKB 022 PM, both created by Korobov, easily the most cursed gun maker in the whole world. The AK-12 Zlobin prototype, the original AK-12, guys, the AK-12 that could have been, but was not. I don't know what I just said there. This thing was created by a guy named Vladimir Zlobin. It was the first version of the AK-12. And I still remember it surfaced on the internet around 2011 to 2013. And it was in a lot of FPS video games. I remember seeing it in Battlefield, in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. So yeah, I was kind of hyped about this gun, and I wanted this gun to be, the Russian army should adopt it. It looked really cool. I would give it that. To me, aesthetically, it mocks the newer AK-12, the one we actually ended up with, the one Russian army adopted in the end. But a lot of people thought that this thing was too cursed, because back then I don't think so. People wanted the AKs to be like super modernized. But to me, it was really amazing. Some people even say that the Zlobin prototype of the AK-12 was superior to the current production AK-12s of the Russian army. The current versions certainly do suffer from build quality issues. They also say that the Zlobin AK-12 had better features, better quality, but at the same time it was also really expensive. It had ambidextrous fire selector, which I believe even the modern AK-12 doesn't have. So yeah, some say it was more expensive to produce, some say it failed to meet the reliability criteria of the Russian army, but I think it looked really cool. Where do I put the AK-12 Zlobin prototype? I'd say it easily goes into not cursed. I would love to see this version of the AK-12 make a comeback if somebody can create a clone of it. I know you Americans do that. I'm a big fan of that. Somebody clone this thing. This thing looked really phenomenal for its time, and there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it. That's all I have for this video, guys. I'll try to do more long form content. I know I haven't been doing these more often, but the shorts are not going anywhere. Expect more of them. I love making those shorts.